me show my first slide here. This is the bit.ly link. It's just going to the Ultimate blog. I'm going to show the Ultimate blog in a bit, along with some other content that we actually posted for 20.1. We did a lot of good stuff to keep you up to date. And again, this is all about 20.1 and what we are shipping. So today's hosts, myself, Constantine, who's our Director of Product Development, Brian, Senior Product Owner, manages all the community stuff and all around known in social media circles, et cetera, for promoting Infragistics. And then George Abraham, of course, everyone knows, our Senior Product Owner, UX Architect, who drives the Indigo product. So we have everyone online that can help answer questions, plus a few others. So if you have any questions, keep popping up the questions in GoToMeeting, and we'll jump on them as the webinar goes through. So I'm going to go right into what's new in 20.1. First off, the themes for 20.1, we have 4 areas that we focused on. Hyper productivity with design to code. You're going to see a demo from George on some of the things we added to Indigo Design. We're continuing to improve that product. If you went to our office hours maybe 2 months ago, you saw a preview of our app builder, which is going to ship with Indigo Design later this year. We'll have a public preview as well. Stay tuned for information on that, but that's really exciting. Number 2, delivering innovations and new experiences in Angular, React, Web Components, and ASP.NET Core. This was a huge release for Angular, huge release for React and Web Components, and we updated our ASP.NET Core to the latest bits from Microsoft as well. Windows Forms and WPF get .NET Core 3.1 support, and then we updated Xamarin as well for this release, and we'll talk about Xamarin a little bit later. So looking at this hyper productivity with design to code, the product is Indigo Design. If you're not familiar with Indigo Design, we keep talking about it at every webinar. It is a core strategy for us because everything today is about the design to develop experience. It's about going from design to some sort of code output or code asset. And that's what this product is all about, but more. We've got some cool new features in this release that you'll see in the demo. But if you're not familiar and you want to just get the high level overview of what design to code is, we have a design system for Ignite UI for Angular for Indigo, which the design system maps to our UI components, and you get those in Sketch. So anything that you build in Sketch actually will map out to something that you can generate in code in Angular. Then in the cloud, we have a cloud service which allows you to do prototyping, image-based prototyping, collaboration with stakeholders, with threaded commenting, usability studies, sharing, as well as some of the cooler things today you'll see around some of the markup and getting actual CSS from those designs right from the cloud. And then finally, you can generate apps for your design. And this story continues throughout this year. We will continue to talk about getting code from design, the whole design to code experience, and culminating in with some of the cool stuff we're shipping with the app builder later this year. So new for Indigo is this onboarding experience. I call it the workbench. It's your entry point into Indigo Design. We completely redesigned this. So you have much quicker access to your prototypes, to your usability studies. There's some new features for filtering, sorting, trying to find what you're working on. And keep in mind, in some teams, you could have 50 or 100 prototypes per workspace or more that you're sharing with different people. So all of these usability features end up being really critical to being successful with the product. You'll see some of this in George's demo. We've also shipped a new tool called the Inspector. The Inspector, we actually started shipping this late last year, and we've just done some improvements over time. But the Inspector is awesome because it is core to a developer story of getting the information they need from a design to effectively build out their application. So being able to get out all the CSS, spacing, paddings, colors, images, and being able to quickly copy that and then use it in your application. So this isn't code generation, it's actually looking at the design, all of the individual assets in a design, and being able to pull those out in and use them in your application. And then finally, with Indigo Design, unmoderated user testing was completely redesigned. This is really awesome. What we've done here is we've changed the way that you record your studies. We changed the way that you can view the reporting of your studies, and we changed the way that all of the analytics work for the tester who is trying to do the studies. This is really important in this new normal of COVID-19. Like I said, all of our offices are closed. All of your offices are closed for the most part. If you live in the US or some of these other countries that are still battling this virus, and there's always this phase like some people go back to the office, some aren't, but business has to go on. You need to do testing on your designs. So unmoderated user studies help you create a study, share it with a bunch of people, and they take it online at their leisure. You don't have to be face-to-face, in person, or spend all this time setting up crazy Zoom meetings and try to watch what they're doing. This is really critical to how you can effectively design in this new normal of COVID-19. So George is going to show a little bit of this. And so with that, we go right into a demo. George, I am going to pass it off to you, and you can share your screen. So I am going to stop showing my screen. All right, George, you should be the presenter now.
Yep. All right, so let's look at what's fresh in Indigo Design in the cloud. As Jason mentioned, we have a much more focused experience with respect to how people take part in usability testing and all that stuff. But most importantly, we have a fresh starting point for anybody who is entering the Indigo Design experience, where you can see front and center, what is the value proposition we are offering. On one side, we have this notion of creating a prototype directly in the cloud using images. And that is what's going to be used in order for you to test that design with your stakeholders. And the reason we have adopted this image-based route for prototypes is that if you have a WPF app, if you have a WinForms app, as long as you have the ability to grab a screenshot, you should be able to create a fully functioning flow or a navigation flow for your prototype, which allows you to test even desktop apps with your target audience. Once you have designs already published in this ecosystem, you will see something more richer in what we have to offer. And this is the first space within the group workspace we're talking about. And group workspaces allow you to kind of create these zones inside the cloud, which allow you to collaborate with specific team members or around specific projects. And you can always invite new people to basically collaborate with you on these designs. So these are the prototypes in here, as Jason talked about. We allow you to kind of publish prototypes directly by creating prototypes from scratch. So I can click on a new prototype action, and then I can just drag and drop images in here and be able to basically mimic the user journey, which you're trying to show. But if you are users of Sketch, we have a plugin which allows you to sync directly from the desktop application into our cloud, allowing you to kind of just jumpstart your process without actually having to redo anything. Let me show you quickly what Jason talked about with respect to Inspector. And the Inspect features actually works automatically for designs which have been published from Sketch. And it allows you to see, like, this is the experience when you have actually added images to this prototyping experience. And then you can create navigation flows by just simply coming and just dragging on whatever zone you want people to click on, and then say add an interaction. And you can say, you know what, I want to add interaction. I don't want it to go to this particular screen. And that's that simple as creating a prototype. With the Inspect feature, it allows you to kind of extract visual specifications directly from the design without actually having somebody spend the time to redline or mark out all these UIs. So you can just select on stuff. You'll see the information just coming from Sketch, what the font is, what the font family is. But we have also made it really handy with the CSS, which you can just copy and paste and then use that in your IDE directly. So naturally, you can see once I have something selected, we also show you the relative spacing between things. And this becomes really critical when you're trying to mimic the design in your development environment. And with our sketch to code story, this step becomes redundant because with our code gen, you get everything automatically with a completely new experience. We won't have time to talk about it today. So let me just quickly dive into what usability testing looks like once you have created a prototype in this manner. So let me just switch back here. So for any design which is available in your workspace, what you could do is just select that particular prototype here, like for example, this one, and say, I want to create a new usability test. And then you're pretty much ready to get started. And you can define tasks which you want people to do with your design. And you know what your design is capable of. So you can say, in this case, I'd say book a new ride. And then you just simply use the design which has been provided to map out how you expect somebody to complete that task. And as you're using this prototype, you can see on the left side, the path is actually being recorded. And using the same approach, you can continue to add additional tasks. I said, finish your ride. And that is the task you want users to complete or perform. And you can say, you know what, this task starts pretty much from here. And you say confirm, finish your ride. And now I have 2 tasks ready to go. In order to get it ready for participation, I can switch over to the test settings area. And then here I can offer some welcome messaging and thank you messaging, which your users would see when they try to take part in a usability test. And to get it ready, all I have to do is say start testing. And that's it. I have a URL, which I can now share with anyone, and they would be able to take part in this usability study on the fly. In the interest of time, I'm not going to do a live participation experience, but what I'm going to do is in the chat area, in your own free time, I'm posting a link to a potential usability test so that you can see what the participation experience looks like. Because now I'm going to switch over to the usability report, which shows what it looks like after participation has taken place. And in this remote usability testing format, the real advantage is that I do not have to be present for people to take part. People are working on their own timelines and schedules. They can take part in this usability test at any time. And once they have finished taking part, I get automatically notified in my email whenever somebody completes that particular usability test. And that allows me to come back and take a look when it's ready. And when I feel like I have enough people taking part, I can always open up that test and stop participations altogether. So this is a usability test which has at least 7 participants in there. And it shows a rough average of participation of success rate at 75%. And now I would like to see what exactly happened during that usability test. And now you can see that this test had 4 particular tasks. It shows me very quickly what the average success rate was, how many people attempted it, and how many people actually completed that task, and the average time of class. On the right side, you're seeing the funnel, which we had defined as the expected success path. And it's showing you very quickly for across all participants that, okay, people only 7 people started, only 5 people moved on to the next step. And I can see where the drop-offs are actually happening. And it's also showing me the first click report. What this means is that if I look at the legend, all the blue interaction markers are the ones which we expected people to do, and the reds are misclicks. And I can say, like, out of the 7 people who tried, there are people who actually clicked on something else as their first interaction. But we make it even easier. Down below, we have user segments where we are automatically segmenting participants based on whether they use the expected path, an alternate success path, or a failed path. What that means, expected, as the name suggests, is what you define. Alternate success path gets more interesting because it says people were able to complete that particular task, but they took some deviations. And I can actually just quickly scan what exactly they clicked on just by hovering on this particular marker in the timeline. And even better, the failed paths are the ones which are most interesting because these are people who never finished this particular task. If this is not your cup of tea, all I can do is click on View Path, and that's it. I am able to see all the steps the user actually participated in. and if I go to any one particular step, I can see the sequence in which they actually interacted with this prototype, which is pretty awesome, right? Because I can say, first they clicked here, then they clicked here. And when I hover over it, it tells me exactly what kind of interaction they were trying. Even better, if I feel like I need more information, and we have this capability of doing a video recording of that user's session, and if the person has allowed us to actually record that session, I would have this play video option in here. So I can either view path, which is collected irrespective of whatever they did. We always have this information. But if they have video provided, I can always exactly watch what the participation was like. And the timeline you see below is exactly identical to the timeline we were seeing in the overview table. So with this capability of having these kind of micro visualizations and be able to show aggregate statistics very quickly, even if you have 30 people who took part, or 15 or 10, at an instant, you can actually look at your report and be able to triage that, okay, of all these tasks, this is the one which is most problematic. Let's look at this first. Of this set, 3 people fail. Okay, let's look at that one. And now I can get a very quick bird's eye view, and it's ready for, like, you can take a screenshot of it and present it to your management team to say, okay, this particular flow is really not working. What is working is this alternate flows which people are doing, and where we need to go in and redesign. And that's what we're trying to do, is minimize the cost of rework by allowing you to collect this kind of usability statistics on top of very low fidelity designs, whether they're screenshots. We have had the platform in the cloud which allows you to create these flows, the platform in the cloud which allows you to take part in usability tests, and we have this usability report area which allows you to get a bird's eye view and quickly triage where exactly you need to go and redo your designs. Jason?
Wow, awesome, George. That's a great update, lots of great features, and I really think if folks have not looked at usability studies, then you should, because it is something that will help us or help you build apps faster and better, especially now that everyone has to work at home. So this whole unmoderated piece ends up being really, really important. So let me go back to our slides here, and I'm going to keep moving right along and talk about app modernization in the modern web, of course, with Ignite UI. So with this release, we sort of culminated up this Angular 9 and Angular 9.1 update. With these products, we actually release monthly, if not sooner, very rarely, a little bit later. But the idea is we're on a continuous delivery cycle. So you're seeing updates all the time. And it's just the way the modern web works. And we try to get there for all of these products that we bring to market today. But there's a ton of new features. I listed them here in the bullets on the left. The key thing is a lot of data grid features. All of these things are areas that you've asked for improvements or new capabilities, or we had APIs for, we just didn't add the interactive features. And so you'll see some of this in Konstantin's demo today. We've got the new splitter control, a new Excel style filter dialog for custom filters. But the biggest kind of coolest feature that you can see in my animated graphic is the new doc manager. And Konstantin will demo this with our data analysis directive today as well. So the doc manager is something we're shipping across every modern web platform, including jQuery. So no matter what you're using, you can get the brand new doc manager. It's the one of a kind. No one in the market has anything like this. It is a native web component, and it is slick. So if you've used doc manager and WPF or Windows Forms, now you can enjoy it on the web. We've also shipped a new showcase app. This is so cool. This is a task management app. It really kind of highlights all the bells and whistles of the Angular grid and product, right along with theming, custom interactions with the grid, full editing, drag and drop, you name it. You can download this and all the source code right from this URL. And I'll show you how to get there when I show you the website as well. React, this is a huge feature release for React. One of the, if you've been paying attention, we shipped React a little over a year ago, and we had a grid, and we had a handful of controls. We've really spent time in this release focusing on the interactive features of that grid and giving you all of the capabilities that you would expect if you were to deploy this out to your users. So the ability to show columns, hide columns, pin to the right, pin to the left, do grouping, do sorting, do filtering, all that good stuff is available now in the React grid. It's super, super fast, optimized for performance, virtualized rows and columns, and this is a really exciting product, and we're excited to get it into your hands. The bulleted list on this slide is all of the features and capabilities that you get in React, and I highlighted in yellow some of the new features that we added that I'm going to show in our demo in a second. Another cool sample in using a bunch of different controls together and how they integrate is another reference app. We actually have two dashboards pulling in COVID-19 data. One is built in Angular and one is built in React, and they're slightly different. But these are all the source code, and all of the styling and everything is available online. So you can go grab these samples and really show off. They really show off the capabilities of the product, and it will help you get started. And that's the whole reason we do these showcase samples. Now, web components. You're probably thinking, hey, wait a minute, doesn't this slide look very similar to the React slide that I just showed? And yes, it does, because the React product and the web components product are the same code base. So what we're doing with this product and all future controls, even what we're building in Angular, is we are starting with web components. And the reason is web components are a browser standard. You're not tied to a framework. There's no, oh, what's better, React or Vue or Angular? Because once I choose this component set, I'm kind of stuck in that silo forever. Well, guess what? With web components, you don't need to worry about that. So what we've done is we've built a pure web component dependency-free product, and we have built native wrappers so they work well with your React bindings. And then when you look at something like the doc manager, you can just use it as an Angular component in your Angular app, and the same goes with jQuery, etc. So this is pretty exciting. It helps you future-proof. So if you're really worried that, hey, down the road, I might want to change, well, don't worry, because with Infragistics, you really have nothing to worry about when it comes to React or web components. This is a great product. Again, you'll notice the same items are highlighted because it's essentially the same. We also have a cool showcase here. This is just in the sample browser for the web components. This is an example that we shipped in React maybe 6 months ago, which was just like some master detail app. Well, now you throw in the doc manager, it's an interactive UX that gives your users the ability to move things around, change the location of panes, and kind of arrange the screen however they like. And this is the beauty of the doc manager. You give your users the ability to create the screen how they want and persist it out, and they can reload it next time, and it's actually really cool. And this is something we're continuing to work on. So expect updates all along the way, and we're looking forward to feedback on this guy as well. ASP.NET Core, ASP.NET MVC, we are staying current with Microsoft's .NET Core Story across these platforms. And as I mentioned earlier, features like the doc manager you can get as well in these controls. So these are really mature tool sets. I think we first started shipping this product around 2011. I say over 100 controls. There's probably 150. It's got everything from pivot grids to Excel spreadsheets to tree grids. I mean, you name it. You can pretty much build whatever you want with the .NET Core MVC product, which has an underlying framework of using all the jQuery controls. So it's pretty mature, pretty rich, and we are keeping it up to date. And then the number one question lots of people ask is, what about Blazor? So we have a summer 2020 ship date for Blazor. Currently, you can get our preview. I probably wouldn't recommend that. It's about a year old, maybe a little bit less. Microsoft's been continuing to improve Blazor over time. and they're still doing that. I think we'll probably see a fairly stable release of Blazor around .NET 5 in the November timeframe, but your wait is almost over. We have a target of the end of July, and that's really what we're marching towards to ship this to market. And you can see by the extensive list that I'm showing you on the screen, this is what you're going to get in V1. So it's not just some lame grid with, you know, scroll bars. It's actually a full-fledged grid. Everything that you see in our web component grid, you're going to see in a Blazor grid, pie charts, radial charts, tree map, doc manager, spreadsheet, all the charting that you'd ever want. And we plan on having inline editing in the grid. Right now, it's not inline, but we plan on shipping that as well by the end of July. So pretty exciting stuff coming if you are looking for Blazor. It is going to be a great path forward for the Visual Studio developer who wants to build modern single-page applications, but use C#, and much simpler than maybe some of the stuff that you've tried in the past if you're a rich client developer. So we're pretty excited about this. And then, of course, native UX on mobile. Xamarin was updated. We shipped a ton of new features in Xamarin. And you're probably thinking, wait a minute, you know, I'm not doing Xamarin. Why are you updating Xamarin? Well, the reason is, if you paid attention at Build, Microsoft announced MAUI, the multi-application user interface, which is the pathway that they are taking with Xamarin forward. This is a cross-platform framework which will allow you to build applications for native mobile, for desktop. It doesn't really matter. So MAUI is coming. I believe we should see MAUI in its final bits in .NET 6, maybe sometime around the end of 2021. But it's important for us to just keep these frameworks up to date so the changes aren't as big as they are coming along. And you probably saw things like .NET for iOS, .NET for Android, all that's part of MAUI, all that's part of .NET 6. And so we are here today, and we're going to keep ensuring that we have the most up-to-date bits for that framework when it comes out. And then finally, looking at .NET Core 3.1, this is huge for rich client developers. It's a big story for Microsoft. One of the biggest changes with this is Microsoft basically wrote a new design time designer in Visual Studio, so the WYSIWYG drag and drop. We are in the process of updating all of our controls to work with the new designer, which should ship later this year with .NET 5. And there's previews out today of the designer, but right now, if you drag our .NET Core 3.1 bits, you just get a code window. In the summertime, hopefully in the next month, you'll see some WPF designers from us. And then after that, Windows Forms will follow. Our target is to ship in November with full support for the new designers in Visual Studio. So let's take a look at some demos here. And first, I'm going to show real quick what I mentioned earlier. So these reference applications. So if you go to Learn and Support on our website and you click Reference Applications, we've got across the top here a bunch of different categories. And based on what you click, you're going to get different types of applications based on frameworks and whatnot. So I would definitely go up here, for example, the new Task Planner app, download the sample right from here, view the demo online. This is exactly what I just showed in the slides. And what's cool is I just want to highlight this theme. You notice the rounded corners and how this looks more spacious and rounded and kind of cool. If I change this to the light theme, I go to square. It's not as spacious. It looks different. This is the power of what we did with our theming engine in Angular. It is super, super robust. So we're going to ship the dark theme of this as a separate theme. I talked to Constantine last week. So you can expect to apply something like this. And of course, we already have a dark theme, but this one's a little bit different with the rounded corners. So this is pretty slick. I wanted to show that off. And then the other thing under Learn and Support is the blogs. So we posted a lot of blogs. So we've got the What's New blog. We've got a roadmap blog. Brian's got the new What's New in Xamarin. We've got a packaging changes blog to Ignite UI. We've got the Angular 9.1 release blog from Rado. We've got what's new in React from Brian. Rado posted a doc manager blog last night, web components blog, updates to NPM. So take a look at the blogs because there's a ton of stuff that we posted in the last week or so. So now if I go to the Ignite UI for React homepage, the cool thing about React and Angular and all these other platforms is they're the samples that we put on the website are all live. So this is actually a live running sample that gives you an idea of some of the capabilities of the product. So I mentioned the grid toolbar in the new features, and the grid toolbar gives you some nice options like the ability to show and hide columns. So you can see here in this column chooser, I'm going to show and hide various columns, which is super easy. I also can pin columns to the left. So let's say I want to pin country to the left and photo to the left. So now those guys are pinned left. And now when I scroll, I can, see those guys pinned to the left. At the same time, if I use the column options dialog, I can pin to the right as well. So you can see here, I've got this guy now pinned to the right-hand side. Also in column options, if I scroll down, you've got options for sorting. I can do grouping. I can do column hiding right here. I can move columns to the right or left. And of course, I can do filter searches, or I can just select and deselect items in the filter and show and hide items. As well, this is a grouped sample as it is. So you can see we've got grouping. The nice thing about the grouping is you get the nice sticky headers at the top. So you can see that the headers will stick as I scroll, which is really slick. And then in this sample as well, we've got column summaries on this at the same time. So there's a lot happening in this grid, but this is your typical line of business grid. And what's great about this release is you get this in web components and you get this in React. So if I jump over to the web components homepage, same sample, looks the same. I can look here, view all web component grid samples, and I'm right back into this nice grid experience with all of the same capabilities and samples. But if I click over to the column chooser here, this column chooser ends up being a UI that you can put inside of the toolbar. You can actually make it separate. So a cool sample is showing the column chooser in the doc manager, where you can show and hide the column chooser and just update the grid as you need. So the column chooser ends up being something super useful, very cool, typical sort of component that we would have in Windows Forms or WPF. Here, if I use my grouping option, so let's say I want to group by status. So now I have the status header, and you can see I've got all my delivered, packing, and I think, oh, there's a shipped status as well. At the same time, I can do it by product. So let's group by product and status. And now a cool thing that you can do with this grid is everything I'm showing here is driven by API or the interactive features, but I've got status and product name. I can also hide these. So I'm going to go ahead and hide product, and I'm going to hide status like so. And now you almost have a tree grid experience. So I'm not showing the columns that are shown in my group. So you can customize the way this guy looks really however you'd like. And then of course, I'm not going to go through every sample. What I would suggest if you're looking for line of business features, most of the samples we have are very similar to this, where you've got your column options. You can just interact with the grid and do different sorts of things. If you're looking for something like high performance, financial services type data, you can see here we've got a grid. It's got a ton of data in it, but the scrolling is buttery smooth, and you really have no issues in terms of the amount of data that you could be able to pump into this grid because it's virtualized by row and column. And then this binding live data sample is really cool as well. You can see here I've got 1,000 rows, nice buttery smooth scrolling. But now if I pump this up to 10,000 rows, you'll notice that it's the same level of buttery smooth rendering as well. And now I'll do some real-time updates, and you can see here that there is no hiccup in the way this grid performs. And if I want to change this to a heat map display, instead of just updating the columns you can go crazy with this. So not only do we have all the interactive features, but we have the high performance features as well. I'm not going to show the doc manager. I'm going to let Konstantin show that in his demos, but I do want to highlight a couple other examples that we are shipping. So some richer controls like tree map control is really slick. There's so many different scenarios where you want to display content in a tree map. We also have the geospatial map showing. So this is a nice scatter area series of showing heat conditions across the globe, which is pretty cool. But you can also just show imagery from Esri, from Bing, from OpenStreet. You know, there's all kinds of things that you can do. You can do contour series. We have density series. So this guy here is Australia. It's 1 million data points, and you can see all these dots are actually data points that we're rendering on the geospatial map. And then, of course, I always want to show the Excel library, because the Excel library that you get in React and Web Components is the same that you get in all of our frameworks. I've told the story 1,000 times that we hired the guy that wrote Lotus 1-2-3s, or the guys that wrote Lotus 1-2-3 back in like 2005, and we've been building on this Excel library ever since. And in this case, we've added the features last year to render charts from your data in an Excel spreadsheet. So this, again, one of a kind in the market. No one has this. If you need features like this, they're definitely really cool and available in the product. So with that, I am going to stop the React Web Components demo. You can go ahead and download these products from the Download Now button. What you'll notice on the main menu is the products are clearly broken up now based on what you're looking for. But the other key thing to note is we've also dropped our pricing. So you can get all of these Ignite UI products now for an $849 subscription. And that's pretty cool if you are a new customer and you're looking to get the products. If you're on the webinar, you're already an existing customer. Or you already have all this stuff. So with that, I'm gonna stop my screen sharing. I am going to pass it over to Konstantin, who will share his screen now. And Konstantin, you are the presenter, so take it away.
Thank you, Jason. I'm gonna share my screen now, and let me just, I want this to go away. Okay. That's how you do it. Okay, thank you very much, Jason. So as Jason said, we not only do components in those feature releases or new features, but we also try to develop 1 or 2 new applications with every release, so that we showcase how exactly those components that we're building are used in real scenarios and real rich applications that they're supposed to be building. And so Jason showed the COVID-19 React application, and I'm going to show the Angular one. We built this one back in March when the whole COVID-19 thing started. Well, not when it started, but when it kind of got out of control, and we were already working from home. We were looking at the dashboard that Johns Hopkins had, and we were like, yeah, we can put this together in like a day, and we really did. As you can see, this dashboard actually looks a little bit different than the React one. The idea was to show different features with each of the dashboards, but also to make them fully functional, to display that, you know, the goal that you want to achieve with a dashboard like this can fully be you know, achieved using this single toolkit that we provide. So this entire application is all done with Ignite UI for Angular. The map is available in the product, the lists, the grids, the charts, everything that you need in order to accomplish this kind of an application. Now, this one we have on GitHub, so it's accessible to everyone. You can, you can fork it, you can download it, you can clone it, and you can see the code for everything, how everything is achieved. And it's set up so that, you know, you can just npm install and run it. Now, Jason saved me a little bit of time. I was actually going to show the task planner as well, but he did that for me. And so I don't have to, spend more time on it. Now I'm going to move to what Jason mentioned probably 35 times already, and this is the doc manager. Now the doc manager is really a huge component for us. Like, it's difficult to build. There isn't equivalent components out there. We actually have one, but in WPF, and we've never done this kind of component for web before. And so the doc manager, I'm going to show it in the Angular context, but as Jason already mentioned, we decided to take an approach with it where we build it as a web component so that this component can be used natively into any framework or library that you're using. So regardless of whether your application is on jQuery, it's on React, Angular, or like pure HTML and JavaScript, like vanilla JavaScript, this component is fully usable because it's dependency free. And I'm showing this component in a richer example. So in Angular, we had this data analysis sample that we've been showcasing a lot because it truly shows how grids and charts interact with each other. And the data analysis sample is something like where you can select different data points in the grid and then perform some kind of analysis on them, like, just apply color scale, show the top 10% of values, so on and so forth. By the way, what I'm showing is also a new feature that we released with the Angular grid, and this is column selection. So the data analysis sample is now such that I select some data, and as you can see here, I have a chart selector. Now, previously, the chart selector was a different type right here. It was a tab at the top, and you switch, and then you select the chart. So I'm going to just select an area chart, and this area chart is spawned based on the data that I just selected. And then I'm going to dock it at the top. And so this is now how this whole application was actually enhanced using the doc manager. I'm going to do a different data chart. I'm going to dock this one to the right of the first one. And as you can see, like, it has the full capability of what you would expect from a doc manager in Visual Studio, right? And you can just allow your users to modify the layouts of the applications in a way that they want them to be. And this is really perfect because you can also save those layouts on a user basis, and then have the saved configuration loaded per user for everyone that wants to utilize your application. And it allows everything that you would expect from the doc manager, pinning and pinning, the things like that. And I can create multiple tabs with charts, right, like this, where the different types of charts are selected in the different tabs. Now this chart became kind of squished, so I'm just going to resize. And I hope this makes it perfectly visible how this component enhances the applications. Now, currently, this component is used in a single window scenario. Now, in the next iteration, what we're going to expose is API, where you can actually spawn new browser windows out of this. And then undocking a window can actually create a new window for your user, which is separate from this browser, like an entirely new browser window. Now, let me jump into some samples that we have, some new samples for new features that we have for Angular. Now, the first thing that I'm going to show is we added a row pinning feature. Now, row pinning, it's an essential feature. It's not that exciting by itself because it just freezes some rows to the top or the bottom of the grid. But together with this feature, we actually did another enhancement to this grid. And we added to what we call the action strip. And the action strip component is an overlay component that can be spawned on top of any other control that you have. And you can define custom buttons and custom actions that will be performed on top of this component. Like in this case, this is the grid row. Now, for the grid, we have some predefined actions, ones that you don't have to write yourself. And so for this one, we have the row pinning and row unpinning actions. So you see that with the pin button, I pin, and then with the unpin, the row is unpinned. Now, we also have these editing actions where I can quickly delete a record out of the grid, or I can start editing in the grid. Now, how easily is this configured? Let me show you. This is the code. The component is defined into the grid template. Then it is an action for showing it and hiding it is defined, like this. And then the buttons for pinning and editing just come out of the box as predefined components in Angular. Now this, saves a lot of time when you want to create an application similar, for example, to Gmail. Let me move on to another pinning feature that we added. So in the past, the column pinning that we were offering with the Angular grid allowed users to pin columns to the left. Now, it may seem like a small enhancement, but we've also added pinning to the right so that you as a developer now can choose which direction the pinning can be performed in. And you can notice that with this grid, similar to what Jason showed with the React grid and with the Web Components grid, we have a very similar UX on how pinning or hiding or other common features, common functionalities would be presented. And so in this grid, the same way as in the other grids, you can define a toolbar and then have column choosers or pinning selectors in the toolbar through buttons and drop downs and so on and so forth. You can also choose a different approach where you don't necessarily have to use the toolbar if you don't want to, and then components like the action strip come in. Now another another component that we released with 20.1 with Angular 9.1 is actually the date range picker. So we've had a date picker ever since probably the second feature release of Angular. So we've had a date picker for about 3 years now. But it was a common request from users to actually add a date picker where users can select a range of dates. So this feature is commonly used in booking scenarios and time span scenarios where you want to show data for a certain time span in analytics scenarios. And we were like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. We need to add this component. And with 9.1, you can access it. And this component is as easily configured as this. So you have a date range picker component, and then you just define a range with the start and end points, and you bind them as a value or as an ng model. Now, with this, we actually added the DateTime Editor as well. Now, the date picker was the calendar where, either from a drop down out of an input or from a pop-up calendar in the dialog, you can select a date. And there is users that want to have just the plain UI, the date editor without any additional UI spanning with the calendar or so on and so forth. And so we've added this with 9.1. And as you can see here, I have a date input where, when I move with the keyboard from months to days to years, I can modify the values using the arrow keys on my keyboard. And the same holds for a time picker. As you can see here, I still can modify the different parts of the time picker using the keyboard, and then the AM and PM changes and so on and so forth. Another neat component that we've added is the splitter. So you saw from the Doc Manager demo that there was a splitter in the Doc Manager, but this is not the splitter that we're shipping in Angular. This is a native Angular splitter. As you can see, it looks a little bit different than the Doc Manager one. I mean, it has those arrows where you can, you know, collapse to the left or to the right, and vice versa. And it is a native component. It's still another layout component that we're adding to enhance the value that we're delivering for full-blown applications in Angular. And the splitter, of course, can do things like this, where you have, you know, multi-panels that are split horizontally and vertically with different content in them. By the way, this example is also showing something else, where all of the scroll bars and the Angular components are now themable through the theming engine. I mean, this may sound like a small feature, but scroll bars were looking really out of place, you know, when you apply a really nice theme with rich colors, and then you have these white scroll bars that just, you know, make everything look horrible. And last but not least, what I'm going to show is some grid keyboard enhancements that we did. Now we have this brand new updated article on keyboard navigation in the grid, where we've actually documented in details all of the different keyboard combinations that you can use in the grid in order to use shortcuts for different features. Because in some cases, you know, you may want to use the default UI, but in some cases the default UI is not really good for your application. And we have made sure to make everything accessible through the with the keyboard for, you know, users, and especially for accessibility purposes. Because in order to make any component that we ship fully accessible, it needs to be keyboard accessible, and it needs to be accessible to an assistive technology like a screen reader, narrator, the Chrome screen reader, so on and so forth. And so we've documented all this, but the major change that happened on the grid is actually we've updated it up to the latest accessibility standards, where we've limited the number of tab stops in the component. Now, what does that mean? Now, a tab stop is anything that, you know, when you hit the tab key and move focus, it enters, like it gets focused. Now, previously, the grid was fully tab accessible, meaning every element in the grid could be accessed with the tab key. Now, what that was doing to accessibility and to the components in a larger scale application, where it's not only the grid on the page, was that whenever you reach the grid, you can never actually get out of it, especially if it's a large data grid. Like, you know, if it has hundreds of thousands of records, like hundreds of columns, because then millions of cells would be rendered. And in order to get out of this grid and to reach the next element on the page after the grid, you would need to hit tab a few million times. And nobody would do that, right? And especially like a blind person, they would never be able to get to the next part of the application. Now, what we did now is we've limited the tab stops in the grid to the 4 major elements that it has. It's the, actually, I should say 5. If you have a toolbar, the toolbar is the first tab stop, then is the headers, then is the grid body, then is the footers and the paging area. And now, going through the grid is really quick. Now, does that mean we've broken the keyboard navigation of the grid? No, it doesn't, because you can still navigate anything within an area using the arrow keys, as you could previously. But you don't have to necessarily be sunk in the grid once you reach it with a tab. And so here, I can start moving within the cells using the arrow keys, but still, tab actually gets me to the next element. And Jason, that's all I had. So I'm gonna, you know, transfer it back to you.
That's awesome. Thank you, Constantine. Then we're just gonna wrap it up here. Let me get back to my screen share. Show my screen. Okay, so here we are. Let's wrap this up. The main story is here around Ultimate 20.1 is it drives productivity and ROI. That's our goal with every release for you. And keep in mind, everything we ship is based on what you have asked for. So when we think about what's happening with 20.1, React and Angular are hot. Design to code with remote user testing is the new normal. You should definitely look at this. Windows Forms, WPF, .NET Core, ASP.NET MVC. There's a ton of stuff for Windows Forms developers, or rather Visual Studio developers in general. And we're going to continue down that path this year. Xamarin and Maui, we're going to be ready when you are. And then finally get ready for a hot summer with Blazor. We're excited about shipping Blazor later this summer, which is really like in a couple months now. This is what the roadmap looks like for the rest of the year. You can see the red line in the middle is really where we're at today. July, August, I mentioned the Blazor release and then another web release. So when I say web, it includes React, Web Components, Blazor. Angular 10 is right around the corner, so keep an eye out for new bits from us on Angular 10. The App Builder private preview will be in August, September. If you're interested in this, send me an email and I will route you accordingly. October 20.2 will ship, and we'll have the public preview of the App Builder, and then we'll release the App Builder in December. So pretty exciting stuff, full year ahead. Plus, it's all blogged, so if you're looking for more details, just go to the blogs that I showed earlier and you can read all about it. Another thing to mention, office hours and Priority Support Live. We have our React office hours coming on June 23rd. So that is in a couple weeks. And then Priority Support Live is June 25th. I have the link here for office hours. Priority Support Live, we are sending emails out today. So you'll get emails on how to register for that. Those are cool programs. I definitely would recommend you start attending those. And though we have a feature focus like React for office hours, you can learn about React, but show up and ask anything. All the right people are on these calls to help you. So the call to action, download Ultimate today. I have a huge QR code here. You can just scan it right off your screen to get right to the download. And the URL simple, ultimate/download. IgniteUI.com is where you can get all of the Ignite UI samples. And then, of course, I mentioned all of the blogs that you could read earlier. But please email us if there's questions that you didn't get answered, if there's more stuff that you want to see, if there's whatever, we're here to help. We love hearing from customers, and everything we build and ship is based on your needs. So please, here's all the emails. The slides will be available after the talk. And then, of course, if you need to contact sales, just email sales@infragistics.com. These are all of the locations, and you'll get routed to the right folks. So with that, I want to thank everyone for attending. We'll stay on the webinar for a few more minutes to answer any questions, and then you can expect a follow-up email with the recording as well as a link to this slide deck. So thanks, everyone. We really appreciate it, and we hope you enjoy 20.1.